Picture this. A room thick with the stench of cheap whiskey and cheaper morals. Dust motes dance like frantic ghosts in the slivers of sunlight piercing the grimy saloon windows. On a makeshift stage stands a young woman, Ilara. Her dress is torn, her face smudged with dirt, but her spine is a rod of iron and her eyes, though shadowed with fear, hold a defiant fire. She is not for sale, not in the traditional sense. She is collateral. The man who holds her fate in his hand is Mayor Thornton, a corpulent figure whose smile never reached his cold, calculating eyes. He holds up a piece of paper, a fraudulent indenture contract, and announces to the room of leering miners and ranchers that Ilara's debt to the town is now open for bidding. The winner wouldn't just get a servant. They would own her very will until a debt she never truly owed was paid. The air crackles with a predatory energy. Men shout numbers, each bid a heavier chain being forged around her future. Her gaze sweeps the room, a desperate, silent plea that finds no purchase in the greedy faces before her. She stares sightless at the burning sky visible through the door, her spirit beginning to fracture. Then, from the shadows at the back of the room, a figure detaches himself. He is a man carved from the unforgiving landscape, his face a testament to a hard-lived life. A pale scar runs from his left ear to the corner of his mouth, a permanent accent on a permanent silence. This is Silas. He moves with a quiet economy, his worn duster failing to conceal the powerful stillness of his frame. His eyes, the color of a gathering storm, fix not on Ilara, but on Mayor Thornton, and for the first time, a flicker of unease crosses the mayor's face. The bidding reaches its fever pitch, a cruel-faced foreman with dirt-caked hands making the final, lecherous offer. The gavel is about to fall. Sold! Thornton begins to bellow, but another sound cuts through the air. A soft, heavy thud. Silas stands before the stage, his hand resting on a leather pouch now sitting on the auctioneer's table. It is not the clink of coins, but the dense, final sound of a life's worth of paper notes, of every dollar earned and saved through blood and solitude. "I'm not bidding," Silas says, his voice a low rumble that commands the room. "I'm paying the debt." In full, a collective gasp sucks the air from the saloon. Mayor Thornton, momentarily stunned, recovers with a sneer. He opens the pouch, his eyes widening at the sum. It is far more than the fabricated debt. It is a fortune. It is everything. Silas doesn't wait for a response. He extends a hand to the stage. Ilara, trembling, hesitates for only a moment before placing her hand in his. His grip is firm, respectful. He leads her from the stage, through the stunned crowd, and out into the blinding, unforgiving sun. He had just spent his life savings to save her, and he had not yet spoken a single word to her. Their journey was a silent one, a passage through a world that seemed to hold its breath. They left the dusty, corrupt town of redemption behind, venturing into the high country where the air grew thin and clean. Silas walked ahead, never looking back, but Ilara knew he was aware of her every footstep. He was a sentinel, a walking fortress of solitude. They arrived at a small, isolated cabin nestled in a grove of ancient pines, a plume of smoke rising from its stone chimney like a lonely prayer. This, she would learn, was his sanctuary. He showed her to a small, clean room with a simple bed and a handmade quilt. "You are safe here," he told her, the words feeling unfamiliar on his tongue. He offered her food, water, and the one thing she craved more than anything: space. He did not ask for her story. He did not explain his actions. He simply existed, a quiet and constant presence that kept the darkness at bay. In the days that followed, Ilara watched him. He moved with a purpose forged by habit and sorrow. He chopped wood with a rhythmic, powerful grace. He cleaned his pistol with a methodical reverence, its polished steel a stark contrast to the gentle way he tended a small, struggling garden. Weeks bled into a month. The hard shell of Ilara's fear began to soften, replaced by a cautious curiosity. She started to help, small gestures at first, mending a tear in his shirt, adding wild herbs to the stew, sweeping the porch clean of fallen pine needles. Each action was a question, and his quiet acceptance was the answer. One evening, as the setting sun painted the sky in hues of bruised purple and soft rose, she finally found the courage to ask the question that haunted her. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely disturbing the twilight calm. "Why did you do it?" Silas stopped sharpening his knife and looked at her, his stormy eyes reflecting the dying light. He considered the question not as an intrusion, but as a debt he owed. "Because no person should be owned," he said, his voice raw with an old pain. "I've seen what happens when good people do nothing." It was not a full explanation, but it was a piece of him, a shard of his broken past offered to her in trust. This trust, however, was about to be tested by a devastating truth. One afternoon, while organizing a small stack of books and papers on a dusty shelf, her fingers brushed against a folded, official-looking document. It was the indenture contract from Redemption. Silas had never destroyed it. A cold dread washed over her as she unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the dense, legal text, the words blurring through a sudden film of tears. She had believed he had bought her freedom, but the paper told a different story. Silas hadn't nullified the debt. He had purchased it. The contract, the symbol of her bondage, was now legally his. In the eyes of the law, he was not her savior. He was her master. The deceit, unintentional though it may have been, felt like a physical blow. The sanctuary he had built became, in an instant, a gilded cage. She clutched the paper to her chest, the cabin suddenly feeling small and suffocating. When Silas returned from checking his trap lines, he found her standing in the middle of the room, the document trembling in her hand. "What is this?" she asked, her voice cracking with betrayal. "All this time, have I just been your property?" The agony on Silas's face was more profound than any physical wound. His stoic mask crumbled, revealing the weary, haunted man beneath. He took a step toward her, his hands open and empty.
"Elara, no."
It was the only way, he explained the brutal logic of Thornton's trap. To free her would have been to challenge the mayor's authority, an act that would have been met with violence. By buying the contract, he had used Thornton's own corrupt system against him, legally transferring ownership and removing her from his reach. "That paper," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It means nothing to me. You were free the moment we left that town. To prove it." He told her of his past, of a sister taken by a similar kind of man, a man he was too young and too slow to stop. His failure had carved the scar on his face and a deeper one on his soul. "I couldn't let it happen again," he confessed, his gaze pleading for her to understand. He had not meant to deceive her. He had only meant to protect her, even from the ugly truth of her own rescue. But the paper still existed. It was a loaded gun between them, a legal tie that Thornton could still exploit. And Mayor Thornton was not a man who forgot a humiliation. Back in Redemption, the money Silas had paid was a balm to Thornton's greed, but the gunslinger's defiance was a festering wound to his pride. He had been made a fool of in his own town. For weeks, he stewed, his rage curdling into a venomous plan. A visit to a crooked circuit judge confirmed his suspicions. The indenture contract, while transferred, was still a legal instrument. If the current owner, Silas, were to die, the contract and its asset would revert to the original issuer. To Thornton, Elara was not a person. She was an investment he intended to reclaim. He deputized 2 of his most ruthless thugs, arming them not just with guns, but with a bogus warrant for Silas's arrest on charges of robbery and assault. The warrant was a pretense, a legal key to unlock a door that would only open with blood. As the 2 riders galloped out of town, the sky above the mountains began to darken, the clouds churning into a bruised, angry mass that mirrored the coming storm in the valley below. At the cabin, an uneasy peace had settled. Elara had forgiven Silas, but the shadow of the contract lingered. Silas, ever watchful, sensed the change in the air long before he saw the riders. It was a subtle shift, a tension in the wind, the unnatural silence of the forest. "Get inside," he commanded Elara, his voice low and urgent. "Stay down." And no matter what you hear, do not come out. He pulled his gun from its holster, the metallic click echoing the hardening of his own resolve. He met the two men in the clearing before his home. They dismounted, their hands hovering over their pistols, their faces set in smug arrogance. "Silas," the lead deputy drawled, waving the warrant. "You're under arrest by the authority of Mayor Thornton." Silas's eyes were chips of ice. "You're a long way from your jurisdiction," he stated, his body a coiled spring of lethal potential. The deputy just smiled. "The mayor has a long reach." The time for words was over. The first flash of lightning tore across the sky, and in the same instant, the clearing exploded in a cacophony of gunfire. Silas moved with a deadly fluidity, a phantom of vengeance. He was faster, better, but he was outnumbered. A bullet tore through his shoulder, staggering him. He fell to one knee, the world tilting as pain flared through him. Inside, Elara was a prisoner of her own fear, listening to the shots that punctuated the growing thunder. Silas's words echoed in her mind, "Do not come out." But the image of him falling, the sight of his blood darkening the earth, shattered her paralysis. She was no longer the frightened girl on the auction block. This man had sacrificed everything for her. She would not let him die for her. Her eyes fell upon the source of all this pain, the indenture contract, still lying on the table. In a moment of pure, clarifying rage, she snatched it up. She didn't tear it. Tearing it wasn't enough. She strode to the hearth and thrust the paper into the embers of the fire. It curled, blackened, and burst into flames, the legal ink of her bondage turning to smoke and ash. As the last of it disappeared, a lifetime of being a victim burned away with it. Her eyes, now clear and resolute, found an old, heavy hunting rifle mounted above the fireplace. Her hands didn't tremble as she took it down. She didn't go outside to fight. She did something smarter. She ran to the side window, aimed into the empty woods away from the fight, and pulled the trigger. The rifle's roar was a clap of thunder, a deliberate diversion that made one of the deputies flinch and turn, breaking his focus for a fatal second. It was the only opening Silas needed. With the momentary distraction, Silas surged back into the fight. His movements, though pained, were precise and final. When the smoke cleared and the thunder retreated into a low rumble, he was the only one left standing. The immediate threat was gone, but the cost was etched on his body. He slumped against a pine tree, his vision swimming, the world a blur of green and gray. It was then that Elara rushed out, the rifle dropped, her face a mask of terror and fierce determination. She pressed her hands to his bleeding shoulder, her touch anchoring him to the living world. The storm had broken, and in its wake, the air was washed clean. They were wounded, exhausted, but they were alive, and they were together. The battle had forged their bond in fire and blood, melting away the last vestiges of protector and protected. They were partners now. She guided him back inside the cabin, which no longer felt like his solitary refuge, but their shared home. The physical contract was ash, but a new, unspoken one had been written in its place. One of loyalty, courage, and a shared future. Months later, the scars remained, but they were no longer signs of damage, but maps of survival. The garden Silas had once tended alone now bloomed with a vibrant life that mirrored the change in their own. Laughter, a sound once alien to the cabin, was now a frequent guest. Elara's spirit, once nearly broken, had healed into a resilient strength, and Silas, the stoic gunslinger, found a peace in her presence that all his years of solitude could never provide. They had faced the deceit of a corrupt world and found in each other a truth more powerful than any law written on paper. They had built a family from the ashes of their pasts, two lonely souls who had found their home not in a place, but in each other. But what does it truly mean to be free? Is it merely the absence of chains? Or is it the presence of someone willing to stand with you when the world tries to put you in them? When we are confronted with injustice, do we turn away, content in our own safety, or do we, like Silas, risk everything we have for what is right? And when we are saved, do we, like Elara, find the courage to become saviors ourselves. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of the moment Elara chose to fight back? For more stories that inspire the heart and stir the soul, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel.